Hi there. This is Taylor Ursula of That's So Pisces, and it's time to wind things down with our Pisces third quarter moon. So let's begin. This third quarter moon takes place on Thursday, May the 30th at about 10:30 a.m. here on the West Coast at 9 degrees of Pisces. So though there is a holiday happening this week leading up to this third quarter moon, though people are gathering and celebrating here in the States, there may be a wind of grief that permeates this third quarter moon as we build up to it all week. And that might be in part because Mars, currently in Aries, ruling the North Node and Chiron, is on its way to meet Chiron at 22 degrees on Wednesday, the 29th, the day before this third quarter moon. And the moon moves into Pisces shortly after that conjunction at 22 degrees between Mars and Chiron, which means that all of the moon moving through Pisces through the end of this week into the weekend will be colored by what that Mars-Chiron conjunction brings up for us. Now, we've talked a lot about Chiron. We've had a lot of meetings with Chiron. You'll remember most recently we had Mercury retrograde through the sign of Aries, meeting with Chiron 3 times. Okay, so we also had earlier in the year a meeting between the North Node and Chiron that lasted or unfolded or revealed itself over the span of several weeks. Chiron moving so slowly here in the sign of Aries. With Mars ruling Aries, there may be some larger piece of this Chiron narrative that finally comes to a head, right? Mars is the blade. Mars severs. Mars cuts away at what is holding it back, at what is keeping it from moving forward, at what is refusing to yield. All of these meetings with Chiron leading up to this point have brought various pieces of this Chiron pain to the surface for us to navigate, to try to reconcile. And that reconciliation may be fragments, right? This is a really big wound story that we are working with at this time. Chiron, again, is moving very slowly. So it's not that any singular transit or perhaps aspect to this Chiron is the one that's really sealing the deal or making the pain go away. And perhaps what we're recognizing is that we must take several steps to keep cutting away at this pain, to keep finding outlets for this pain, to find new ways to discuss and describe and move through this pain. Mars now making this conjunction creates some big push, however. Though we cannot fully reconcile this Chiron wound in one go, Mars certainly has the agenda as well as the tools, the resources, the agency to cut away at something or cut away from something, separate us from perhaps some key root or source of this Chiron wound as it exists in our present moment. So with all of that said, we may experience a big push toward catharsis this week. Again, even if it's not reconciling the entirety of the wound, we may find ourselves cutting away again from something that is keeping that wound active. So this third quarter moon in Pisces may be quite an emotional time for us, right? It's being ruled by a Jupiter that has just moved into Gemini as of last Saturday, which is technically its sign of detriment. It's also a sign that squares Pisces. So the moon will enter into Pisces and promptly square its ruler Jupiter. This is interesting because with Jupiter in Gemini technically being its sign of detriment, Jupiter is ready to let go of things that it can no longer carry. And so when planets move into their sign of detriment or fall, planets can no longer sustain or hold on to what they've been carrying before that moment. It's as if that place of detriment creates so many other conditions that that planet must dedicate or relegate its energy toward navigating, that it can no longer carry anything extraneous, anything that is not contributing to its journey, anything that it's maybe been trying to hold on to or preserve or protect in some way. So as the moon enters into Pisces and promptly squares its ruler Jupiter at 0 fresh degrees, we may find ourselves not only feeling emotional about what we're cutting away from, but we may also, perhaps countering that emotion or supported by the depth of that emotion, we may find that we can no longer dedicate ourselves to what it is that we're carving away from at this time. Perhaps there is a connection between what Mars is recognizing in Aries and what Jupiter must surrender in Gemini. It certainly makes sense as they are sextile by sign. They are certainly not sextile by degree by any means, but those two signs can see each other. Aries is able to initiate and Gemini is able to wrap things up. So on Thursday, as this moon makes its way to squaring the sun, it first squares Venus in Gemini at 8 degrees. We've talked about this aspect a lot recently as it's come up in some of our most recent lunations. We had the moon square Venus in our Cancer first quarter moon, which took place shortly after the Aries new moon eclipse. Venus was in Aries with that new moon eclipse, and the moon in that first quarter phase made a square to Venus in Aries. And we talked a little bit about the moon being in domicile and Venus being in detriment. We then also had the moon square Venus from Aquarius while Venus was home in Taurus. And we talked a bit about how the moon was not necessarily in fall there, but it was under Saturn's rule, which is the law for the sign where the moon is in detriment in Capricorn. And we had Venus in domicile. So we had a little bit of a flip-flop there. Venus then sort of winning out, whereas the moon won out the first round. When the moon made this square to Venus in Taurus from Aquarius, the moon did so wanting to be where Venus was. That is to say that the moon is exalted in Taurus, and the moon out there in Aquarius may have been experiencing some detachment or alienation from that sense of pleasure and embodiment that it really wanted to be connected to. So then here we have two planets, neither in detriment nor fall, neither in domicile either. But we do have the moon in Pisces where Venus is exalted. And another turn of the table, Venus now wants to be where the moon is, whereas last time we had the moon wanting to be where Venus was. It's interesting to have this switch off between these two planets that are both so much about love, tenderness, emotion, connection, wanting to be resourced. It may really reveal to us some of the push and pull that we've been feeling about the choices that we have been called to make leading up to these events regarding what we're cutting away. Remembering that Venus is ruling the South Node right now, remembering that Venus will trine the South Node as it moves through Gemini over the next couple weeks. Remembering that Venus is also in charge of letting go of things right now. And that may feel very difficult. That may feel very challenging. These squares between the moon and Venus in general can signify, as I said before, a feeling of nostalgia, a feeling of craving connection and tenderness, and where we've seen those squares happen from each of these planets being in signs they don't want to be in, or confronting planets in signs they'd rather be in, there's a feeling of, I wish I could be on the other side of this. I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I had more of what I needed to make this feel better. I wish there was some way that I could move through what I need to move through now without perhaps activating all of this discomfort. Venus from Gemini, being squared by the moon in Pisces, may feel a sense of wishing we could just kind of zoom out, maybe even fast forward, and be part of something more holistic, something more pure, something more ideal. The moon then goes on to square the sun in Gemini at 9 degrees. And this is the same day that Mercury makes a conjunction to Uranus in Taurus at 24 degrees. Perhaps in the midst of all of this emotion, all of this pain that we're connected to, all of this maybe very Six of Cups kind of reminiscing on when things were good, maybe Seven of Cups thinking about what's going to be next, and maybe fantasizing about what it is that would feel better than this present moment. Mercury making that conjunction to Uranus may have the quality or the capacity of snapping us out of some of that emotionality, of compelling us to commit to the changes that we need to be implementing now, even as everything feels hard. This is the last conjunction to Uranus we'll have for the moment. Mars will be entering Taurus in the next few weeks. And when Mars makes the conjunction to Uranus, once summer is in full throttle, we may find ourselves stepping into some of those radical new realities that we are currently hopeful for or putting into motion at this time. For this moment, Mercury making this conjunction to Uranus has us implementing the mentality to do so, has us making those plans that I just mentioned Mars will be acting on later when Mars comes to meet Uranus. Mercury has us updating our programming. Mars has us opening up to new possibilities and opportunities outside of us. On Friday, May 31st, we have the moon making a conjunction to Saturn in Pisces at 18 degrees. And maybe this allows us or otherwise forces us to acknowledge the permanence of what we are releasing at this time. Getting a sense of what in our foundation this is allowing to deepen or allowing to forge ahead toward. Getting a sense of more of what we've had to separate from, right? If Mars is like the blade that cuts, Saturn is the wall that is built. Both serve to separate, they're just created by different means. And so it might be that Saturn shows us where we are building a sense of fortitude for ourselves, even at the cost of creating distance from what we've separated from. The moon makes a sextile to Uranus at 24 degrees, and that certainly helps us start to make sense of what that Mercury-Uranus conjunction brought up for us. The moon, of course, then goes on to make that same sextile to Mercury. So the moon from Pisces is able to start kind of processing and spreading that information that Mercury and Uranus conjured in that moment, allowing us to start emotionally processing that and connecting that to what our needs will be now. We end this lunation cycle with a conjunction between the moon and Neptune in Pisces at 29 degrees. You've heard me talking about this Neptune that's dangling on the precipice of all of the zodiac. That 29th degree of Pisces is both a blessing and a curse, both the beginning and the end, both a promise and a heartbreak. There is something about that 29th degree that is all the way zoomed out that we then feel is going to plunge into that 0 degree of Aries. So there's something there that can be both freeing. If we've been in like a hanged one chrysalis kind of space where we've been fearful of or fighting like a dissolution of something, this moon may bring us to a place of fully surrendering into that. This moon meeting Neptune may allow us to zoom out and get a sense of that big picture and get creative and inventive and even ebb into some fantasy about what is possible moving forward from here. That Neptune may have us really wanting to escape this present moment. That Neptune may have us so uncomfortable in the feelings of suffering that we are experiencing at this time as we are separating from something. And let's think too about perhaps what role we are playing in that separating. Maybe we are the one catalyzing the separating. Maybe we are the one embracing or having to accept the separating. Maybe it's not that black and white. Maybe we're on both sides. Maybe even if we are initiating the separating, we are still suffering. It's not that everything we are leaving behind at this time is something we want to leave behind. It's that we can no longer move forward with it. We can't continue to tend to our own wounds and carry what we've been carrying. We can't continue to activate our agency while we are weighed down by what has taken that agency from us. And that separating, even if we logically understand it, doesn't mean our hearts can do that easily. Moon in Pisces. Okay, we're going to do a quick recap. We'll get a sense of the entire lunation cycle, starting with that Taurus new moon. And we'll then pull cards for this final piece of this lunation cycle. So stay tuned. Okay, we've got a nice little lineup here of our previous cycle stages, starting with our Taurus new moon, followed up by our Aquarius first quarter moon, which I called our third quarter moon in the transit portion. You're welcome. And here now our Sagittarius full moon from last week. If you missed any of these narratives, take a moment, pause, head back to any of these videos, refresh or take it all in for the first time, and meet us back here. Okay, let's get started. All right, so just a quick reminder, if you want to pull along, head on over to priestessbaby.com/store. There's a free moon phase PDF for your immediate download. The prompts we are asking about today. What is coming to a close now? And my previous attachment to what is ending now. Maybe it's not even previous. Maybe it's still current, right? My attachment to what was. How I can make meaning from this process, for we are humans, and what we can invite in at this time. We'll look at the bottom of the deck, as usual, to see what lies beneath these stories here today. Had some interesting bottom of the decks this season. Okay. Huh. Okay. I wondered if one we've had before would return, and I'm fairly certain that all of them until this moment were reversed. We had a reversed high priestess at our Taurus new moon asking us to listen to the messages we had been neglecting or ignoring. We had a reversed Seven of Swords at our first quarter moon asking us to get clear on and step out of where we are part of the lie. We had a reversed chrysalis at our Sag full moon asking us where we were resisting the breakdown, right? And that's something I referenced as well at the end of the transit portion of this video, with this third quarter moon melding into the fog of Neptune. So it's perhaps refreshing, reassuring, and very appropriate for Gemini season to see the lovers here today for this Pisces third quarter moon. If you watched the Gemini transit video, you've heard me talk all about the lovers and how it is correlated with Gemini. And often we see descriptions of the lovers coming through as meeting a soulmate, finding your true love. And I think all of that's very possible and absolutely a beautiful omen for some of the pain that I've been talking about leading up to this moment. So if that is something that we're opening up to, if we're looking at soulmate vibes, dope, love that for us, okay? But if you watched the Gemini transit video, and if you haven't, you should, you heard me talk a little bit about how I like to focus on the dual nature of the self when we see the lovers. And that's where I make that connection to Gemini personally. Gemini is the twins. Here we have the twins, Castor and Pollux, one mortal, one immortal. The mortal twin dies, and the immortal twin pleads to Zeus / Jupiter to allow him to share his immortality with his brother. Zeus acquiesces this wish with perhaps the caveat that they have to take turns using that immortality. They cannot both be immortal at once. So one must be in the ether amongst the constellations, perhaps, while the other is on Earth. So in that transit video, I talked about the reclaiming of the lost self. Are we earthbound, relegated to our day-to-day tasks, taking care of the tangible, so much so that we have neglected our ether self? We are uninspired, or otherwise we are unable to ground and implement and make use of whatever inspiration passes by us. We are, what's the word that I want here? I guess restricted, perhaps. We feel or we sense or we create a restriction around bringing down this ethereal self. Maybe we feel there's no room for it, there's no time for it. Conversely, we could be stuck in the ether, all inspiration and no action, all ideas and no plan, right? We could be stuck up here in this ether space, fully connected to the ideas and the possibilities, but having no anchor to actually ground those ideas into something tangible to make them real. Let's see what else is here to get a better sense of what story is coming out here. But regardless, we have a narrative here about reclaiming ourselves, reattuning to what love means. If we think about love, real love, genuine love, is selfless to some degree, right? And there is something so selfless in the sacrifice that the immortal twin makes for his mortal brother. It is making a sacrifice of his own power in order to share that power with another. And perhaps that is something we can think about when we think about what genuine love looks like. Not making the sacrifices that hurt us or that bring us back into that Chiron place or that Libra South Node, right? But understanding what true sacrifices are worth it to have the connection that we want to have, whether that's to another or to ourselves. Okay. What is coming to a close now? Everything's reversed. Oh, okay. Well, praise be it. All right. What's coming to a close now is the pain. Perhaps what we are going through at this third quarter moon allows us to bring this suffering to a close. Upright. It might be that like going through this is ending. Okay, so what is coming to a close? Maybe we've been resisting this. I know you love to hear me talk about the resistance when we see the reversal. I know you love that. I know, because it feels so good to be called out. Listen, I'm here too, all right? I'm here in the avoidance and in the resistance. So perhaps we've been resisting or avoiding the catharsis of pain. Perhaps we've been resisting taking that step to actually be in this place, to be untethered, to be shattered, to be frail and vulnerable. And perhaps what we see is that resistance coming to a close. That would be lovely. I love that for us. It does mean we have to then go in here. And that doesn't feel great. But it is necessary. If it's here, if it's knocking on the door, if it's at the threshold and we're avoiding it, we're going to have to face it at some point. Perhaps what's coming to a close is the moving through this process. So when we see the Three of Swords reversed, which we tend to enjoy better than the upright, it means that we have gone through this and we are now finally stepping out of it. So perhaps it's been a long process to step out of the crisis, to step out of the pain, and perhaps we're able to finally see the light at the end of that tunnel. My previous attachment to what is ending now. Well, I didn't want to have to go in there, says the resistance of the three. My attachment to resisting the pain is that I get to hide in here and nobody can come for me. None of this lightning, I mean, look, this was no mistake, right? The lightning is all around us. One strike means more strikes. All right, so my resistance, or perhaps rather my attachment to this resistance, is that I got to stay here. And it's reversed, so maybe we have been staying in here longer than we have been meant to. Maybe this has helped us stay out of this, absolutely. Maybe this reversal is showing us resistance to having to go in here. I'm attached to the idea of not going in this place. I'm attached to the idea of wanting to come out of here. Kind of this feeling of I wish I could fast forward. Some of what I shared about that Neptune conjunction. I wish I could fast forward to the part, or even the squares between the moon and Venus. I wish I could fast forward to a part where this isn't real. I wish I could fast forward to beyond the discomfort that is in this present moment. Well, my loves, me too. How I can make meaning from this process. Maybe it's time to put away the fight. And that's kind of funny because, you know, maybe we've been staying here to avoid this. Maybe we have felt like we can keep dipping this wand into the fire, into the flame. We can keep rising to the occasion. We can keep fighting. And it's not the Five of Swords, right? This is not the Five of Swords where it's like, I can keep fighting and there's a wall. There is still this feeling of being able to create change. There is still this feeling of being able to defend the self. There is still the idea of being able to fight for something. Fight on behalf of something. And perhaps this holding out for this flame has allowed us to remain in this stagnation. Maybe we can make meaning from this by getting a sense of where we feel like we don't have the energy to fight. I don't have the energy to keep fighting, and therefore I don't want to go in here either. If I go through this upright, it will mean that I will keep needing to do this. So fun that we have a 3, 4, 5 here. Even though this isn't a Five of Swords, we can loop in this story that when we go into the Four of Swords, it is a rest stop It is not an end point. It is not a culmination in the fighting. It is a rest stop before we go back to the fight in the Five of Swords. So maybe we don't yet have a space to rest. Maybe we don't feel we are safe to rest. Maybe we can't go through this because we feel that we have to keep fighting, or we don't have the energy to put in anything to go through this. Okay. What I can invite in at this time. Whew, y'all. Okay. You know, while I was shuffling, I was like, wouldn't it be nice if we saw some like nice cards here today? And the tarot deck was like, ha! That's you wishing you could fast forward again, isn't it? Okay. What we can invite in at this time. Tuning into our inner truth. This could be a lower octave of a High Priestess reversed. If I think back to that Taurus new moon. This could be a turning inward in order to hear the rumbles within us. Taking us back to this sword story over here. Maybe we can kind of start over and get a sense of what we are afraid of within ourselves. Ooh. Yeah, that brings us to a nice little resistance story here. Maybe we can invite in some clarity on resisting what truths are emerging from within us. Maybe making some space for that Mercury-Uranus conjunction at this third quarter moon. Perhaps we can create space to listen to what is emerging from us. Maybe that High Priestess reversed was a really big story, right? And we said it was. We said it was bigger than that 1 week. It's a major arcana story that we're being initiated into, but that will unfold over time. Perhaps this is a more on the ground step to that High Priestess, to be on the ground and say, okay, you know what? There are truths within me that maybe scare me. The Ace is like the happiest sword. It's just the beginning. It doesn't mean anything. Lovely that we don't have a 2 here where we have to choose. We have our relationship to our truth, right? That's here in the 3. So perhaps making this High Priestess reversed more accessible in this moment looks like opening up to this within us. Opening up to what is erupting within us, or what is trying to disrupt our external circumstances from within. Allowing that space, allowing that our attention. I love the turning inward of the reversal. Don't look for this outside of yourself. Don't look for truths to start emerging elsewhere. Look for them inside you. I love all of this leading up to this Gemini new moon that we'll have next week. Thinking about all of this being perhaps a preparation for this reclaiming of self. Okay. Let me know how this lands for you in the comments, y'all. I cherish your presence here as we navigate some themes that feel uncomfortable. I cherish your capacity to embrace these stories, and I appreciate so much that you've shared with me what's been coming up for you in this process, and I hope you continue to do so. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, please like this video. Please share with someone who may be ready to embrace this catharsis as a means of embracing themselves, or a form of true love with another. It makes a lot of sense. If we're going to avoid that Libra South Node story again, we're going to have to listen to all of the Mars Chiron stories coming up for us this week. And that really shows up here in these cards. These are all connected to Mars Chiron conjunction wounds. These are all connected to that North Node in Aries story, where we need to be able to first tune into ourselves and listen to what needs to be different in order to make space for this bigger lover story. Subscribe so that we can talk about that Gemini new moon next week. I hope to see you there. Take care.